My guest today is Brendon Jones, a North Richland Hills native currently in hiding from Judge Jesse Navarez following a series of police raids on his home that were court ordered by the 231st. The family court litigation spilled into the family courts in late 2021, and Jones provided documents and eyewitness testimony that alleges DA Phil Sorrells, who was then a Tarrant County judge, issued an illegal bench warrant for Jones, his arrest, for non-appearance, even as Jones stood before Sorrells. Jones, thanks for being our guest today. Before we talk about how you landed with charges of resisting arrest, which you maintain are baseless, let's dive into the family court case that started all of this. In early 2021, your wife's ex-husband filed a motion in the 231st alleging your wife was abusing her daughter, which would be your stepdaughter. I'd like to quote the motion filed by her ex's attorney. So, quote, preceding the filing of this suit, respondent has engaged in a history or pattern of child abuse, end quote. I've reviewed the motion in full. This is me speaking now. But tell us what caught your attention about that part of the motion.
When I read the motion, I had now just to be clear, I had never really had any experience in family court before. I did have experience with the criminal courts involving some family members, and they're much more strict on their procedure. And so when I saw this ex parte emergency relief order, it was something that it really threw me off. I didn't know that the family courts even allowed for that, that basically the attorney was allowed to go in and without any of us having any knowledge, file to have some injunctive relief be granted, meaning to literally take this little girl and move her somewhere else without her mother even being notified that that's something that they're wanting, that without meeting of the minds happening. And so I'm reading this motion, and the attorney, whose name is Timothy Vincent, who's actually he's the biggest donor to the 231st. He hosted many sponsorship dinners and sponsorship events for Navarez during his re-election campaign. He doesn't quote the actual plaintiff. He doesn't quote any affidavit. He doesn't even cite any sort of previous incidences. He just makes a claim for him as an individual, makes the claim that the respondent had engaged in child abuse. And that right there is basically him playing the witness and him trying to play the actual plaintiff. Everything that attorneys say in court is hearsay. Nothing they say is true. But if it's not rebutted, it stands as a fact. So they file all these affidavits and they file this information that's not actually true. But because we don't know the way that they design the court system, we don't respond to them. They stand as a fact. And so had I not responded to his motion or responded to the actual affidavit that was filed that never alleged any child abuse, then that would have stood as a fact on the record and a fact in law in the eyes of the judge. And they do that on purpose. That's why they try to hit you with the ex parte motions and the ex parte injunctive relief orders, so that you don't have a way to respond. And then the cops are already coming to your house and they're using intimidation tactics to get you to comply.
Let's talk about
which is exactly what his strategy was.
Sure. Yeah, there were a lot of consequences for that statement by opposing counsel. Briefly describe the subsequent police raids that led to your ultimately led to your jailing at Tarrant County Jail.
Yeah, so it began actually with the plaintiff calling the North Richland Hills police, alleging that we were not that Valerie was not okay, that she was not all right, and that she needed there needed to be like a welfare check. So they came to my home. I cracked the door open, and I made a mistake, y'all. If y'all are listening, do not ever open the door for the police unless they have a warrant. If they do not have a warrant, you do not ever need to talk to them. And so I made the mistake of, because they wouldn't stop knocking on my door, they wouldn't stop calling my name and trying to get me to open the door and interact with them. I slightly cracked open the door, and they stuck their foot in my door and tried to make me let them inside. Well, I had given them an affidavit, or I had responded to this particular motion, and they threw the affidavit back into my home and left. And then about a week later, we had a gentleman who actually works at Timothy Vincent's office. I don't know what his name is, but I have a video of him attempting to serve my wife, but not. He didn't state that was his purpose. He just kept asking for her and asking where she was. And I asked him who he was and what his business was there, and he hid his name tag and wouldn't tell me any information when he left. And then shortly after that, my business partner actually was just driving across the street to the gas station. He didn't have his wallet with him. The police were waiting for him there, and they arrested him. And when I went to go bail him out in the morning in North Richland Hills, the Tarrant County Sheriff's Department pulls in from the other side of my neighborhood and tries to break into my house while I'm gone. I have some family that's still home, and the door's locked, and they're trying to beat the door down. And so I actually had uploaded this on my YouTube channel. My brother had videoed what was going on the second story. I came back around and told them they just had this temporary restraining order, this temporarily injunctive relief. It was a court order for the constable to go and pick up my stepdaughter. It says, I command you to take the body of this child, and names her. And it's uses what's called a writ of attachment. A writ of attachment is for property, is for the sheriff or for the constable to go and seize property in a civil suit. It's not meant to be for people. So only arrest warrants can go and pick up people. Writs of attachment are not for people. So writs of attachment are for property, which is what I get into in my videos on my Facebook and on my YouTube, that this is actually a commercial dealing what the courts are doing. They're engaged in human trafficking, which is why they're using normal civil lawsuit structure and civil lawsuit procedure to propagate their trafficking, their human and child trafficking. And so after that happened, the judge then did a call for an emergency hearing. And at the emergency hearing, Navarez was not present at the hearing. It was a retired judge named Crawford Catterton, who, after me asking him a few questions and presenting power of attorney for my wife, proceeded to hold me in criminal contempt. And I did not know what the crime was that I committed in his courtroom. But in my jail file, he writes that I'm to be held for 180 days, day for day, or until I reveal the whereabouts of my wife and stepdaughter. So I'm essentially being extorted. And I'm being extorted by a retired judge who's no longer active in the 231st district. And then 2 weeks go by. They basically let me marinate to try to see if I'll break. And then Navarez brings me into his courtroom with my hands chained together, with my feet chained together, and my waist chained. And I'm in that jumpsuit with the orange flip-flops. And they bring me really close to the bench to where I got to look up real high like this. And he tries to get me to incriminate myself by asking me, do you understand what you did wrong? And in legalese, understand means to agree to something. And so I then proceeded to tell him that I didn't understand anything that was going on, but that I did comprehend what was going on, and that he was still good to be responsible for the taxes for the financial transaction that happens in the background that most of the public is not aware of. I was retroactively charged with resisting arrest, of which I had to bond out. And so after I posted bond is when I started interfacing with Phil Soros.
And that landed you in Phil Soros' court. He was a county criminal court judge at that time before running for DA. He did step down to run for DA right around the time this event happened. And some people have found that pretty interesting. But
I was the last ever hearing that he had. I was the last docket that he heard.
So what happened that morning?
When I went to see Phil Soros.
Correct.
Yeah, so there was 3 hearings that I had in the 10th Criminal Court of Tarrant County. First hearing was with a sit-in judge who really had no idea what she was doing. They reset the hearing. The second hearing was with Mr. Soros, who proceeded to kick out all my witnesses, and then tried for about 3 hours to get me to incriminate myself, where I actually incriminated him on the record by asking him what jurisdiction we were operating under, and he could not name the jurisdiction. So the jurisdiction was considered secret on the record, and he acquiesced to that. So that's why in the last hearing that we had, I believe it was like October the 19th or somewhere around there. My final hearing that I had there, it was sent for jury trial. I stood there with three witnesses behind me, and Soros never looked at me in the eye. He looked at the wall and he said, "If Brendon Jones is not here, I'm going to issue out a bench warrant for his arrest." Which I then proceeded to tell him that putting a warranty or warrant on a man when a corporation is the actual principal being charged would actually imply that you're trying to enslave an American, and I would notify the FBI that you're doing that. And when I said that, he just looked at the wall, and the bailiffs did nothing. And so I walked back down, and I filed that I had attended the court, and I had did an entrance of appearance. And then he filed his roll call about 5 or 6 minutes after I did. So showing that I actually was there on the record. I also have video recording of it, of me being in the courtroom. And he then proceeded to retire from the bench after coming back from, I believe it was Thanksgiving or there was some sort of holiday that was coming up right around that time. Yeah. And so once he came back from holiday, he immediately announced his retirement.
Yeah. And so to be clear, you can a judge can issue a warrant for non-appearance if someone's not there, but you maintain, and you've shown me the affidavit, and I've spoken to your other witnesses that you were standing in front of him, and it was retaliatory in your opinion?
I definitely believe it was retaliatory. I have evidence that he actually was basically speaking in code, but admitting that this was a financial dealing and that everything that I had filed in the court record, which anybody can access, is accurate and correct. It had never been rebutted by the state. The judge never rebutted any notices that I gave him. I gave him plenty of private correspondences that he needed to do the financial transactions, which he never did. And so I do intend to be approaching the Treasury to do a financial audit on Tarrant County, because there definitely could be egregious criminal activity. I have plenty of proof. I have data from financial broker dealers that show that they monetize these court cases. They show where they assign these debt instruments called performance bonds to funds like Fidelity. Mm-hmm. So
we'll be following up. Yeah, we'll definitely be following up on that with you. Do you have any final message for folks who are viewing this and have been through the family court system in particular and feel like they did not receive justice? And I'd like to also end, since you're a faithful devotee of the Hare Krishna faith, with a blessing, but go ahead and give us your closing thoughts first.
Yes, I do want to say first that while I am in hiding, it is strategic hiding. I'm not afraid of any of these people. I demonstrated to them that I have no fear, because the way that they make you become fearful is they make you identify with your body and your bodily situation. So no matter what, you always have God inside of you and God with you. He is always with you. They try to take away that knowledge from you by using the things in your life that are personal to you as a weapon against you. This is an intentional retaliatory system, and you need to treat this like a war, because it is. That's why it's the state versus you, or it's your ex versus you. It's always versus, so it's always combative. So you need to treat the court and all the court officers as enemies. But you have to remember what Sun Tzu says: the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. So we don't try to fight them, and we don't try to make them look bad. Instead, what we do is we engage with them, and we force them to admit themselves their own nefarious activities. We kill them with kindness, as they say, but we also protect ourselves. I want you guys to remember that we are souls inside this temporary body, and to not let yourself live in fear, and do not be ashamed, and do not feel guilty for what has happened in the past. As long as we take responsibility for what we did, and we, seek retribution, that we're going to change our ways, and we're going to be the better person, and we're going to forgive those that have trespassed against us, then they cannot make you operate in fear. And when you're not operating in fear, you can outwit them. Salutations to the Supreme Being who is everywhere. May he engage us in his eternal service and relinquish us from this material suffering. We recognize him as the Supreme Being and the source of all happiness, and he who gives pleasure to the senses. We give him our eternal salutations and try our best to concentrate upon him at all times.
Thank you.
So thank you all very much for listening to my message. And I hope this brings you some comfort, and I hope it brings you some confidence that you will be able to do what you need to do to bring not only yourself, but your family back to actual happiness, which exists only under God.
Wonderful. All right, Brendon, thanks for your time.
Yeah, no problem, Adrian.